mental health is something that we don't talk about enough. In the black community, well, we're massively overrepresented in the mental health institutions, even more so than in the prisons. And again, these are questions we have to ask. Well, why?
But once you get a control and an understanding of who you are, no one can use you against you. No one can ever use your mental illness against you. You've already spoke about it, so what you got?
The biggest point in life to resolve mental health is like giving a fuck about a person.
Where did you get the courage? I got the courage for 2 words. I care.
It's Chill Will Radio, where connections will be made, advice will be given, jokes will be told, and things will get real. My name is Willis Cooks, and I'm your host. But understand this show is not meant to be used as a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health professional. Enjoy the show, y'all.
Okay, and we're back. What is it like, 39 minutes left, 39 minutes late. God damn, I can't get shit right. Welcome everyone to Chill World Radio, episode 49, take number 4, because it was a bunch of mistakes. And Kyrie, you and your show, whatever happened beforehand, man, somebody in your crew kicked something out, did whatever, I don't know, but goddamn, man. Yeah. Anyway, welcome everyone. Welcome to Chill World Radio. Welcome back, man. If you're tuning in, thank you for catching on. If you kind of came here and I wasn't talking and it wasn't nothing going on, it's because shit was all messed up here, but we got it fixed and we started 40 minutes late, but oh well, as long as it start. It don't matter when it start, as long as you start. It's like what I said about going to the gym. It don't matter how hard you go to the gym. It's about actually getting your ass in there and figuring out all the shit along the way. So with that being said, welcome everyone to Chill World Radio, man. We just going ahead and skip the whole little check-in piece and how I'm doing, but we're going to go right into the self-care piece because I don't know how I'm feeling right now. I ain't pissed or nothing, but I don't know. I missed y'all. I feel like I ain't been here for a while, man. Last week was the showcase, man. If you did not go to the showcase, you thoroughly missed out. It was a dope-ass showcase, man. I'm sure it's going to be something that's going to turn into some annual thing. And I think it was ironic that it was on the 2-year anniversary of the Good News. So that was pretty dope. So you got next year when it comes, probably around this time, sometime, whenever. You got next year, but you missed out. Last weekend was really dope. I've been really good. Been moving around. I got a lot of things starting on. I'm really trying to schedule my whole little life because it's about to get chaotic pretty soon. Outside of that, right? Moving on forward into the self-care piece, right? I don't know when I said this, but it was a self-care piece sometime some weeks ago. I spoke about say no. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to say no at all. If somebody's asking you to do something, say no. If you don't want to do it, it's okay to say no, and that's fine. Remember, saying no to someone else is actually saying yes to yourself. However, what we're speaking about today when it comes to the self-care piece is something that I personally struggle with, right? I struggle with saying yes, right? So the self-care piece, the one self-care piece I want everyone to implement within their self-care regimen is saying yes to the things that make you happy, right? Saying yes to the things that make me happy. Me, Willis, the show isn't called Chill Will for nothing. I am entirely too cool. I be chilling. I the excitement meter for me is it don't go up, it don't go down. It's just right? The only thing that really kind of takes me overboard if I had a little bit of too much Hennessy, too much dark, whatever, right? But overall, I'm just a calm and chill dude. So when it comes to things that excite me, I haven't really I just bit my tongue out. I haven't really came across too many things that excite me, right? And if I do come across things that excite me, I'm too cool to really admit it. So I'm probably just gonna be it's whatever. Or I'm just probably not gonna do it, right? And it's a lot of dudes like that. A lot of dudes that I know personally who are like that. Some will be excited, just man, that shit cool. You probably got a girl you really just messing with. She alright. How was your day? You probably had a dope ass day and everything. It was cool. You probably really want to do something. Probably really want to go to the movies. Probably really want to see, I don't know, what just came out. It. Probably really want to see It, or what's the movie with the strippers in it? Hustlers. With Cardi B and the strippers in it. You probably really want to go to the movie, see somebody shake their ass, but you probably just like, even though you want to do it, right? We focus on, we make it an importance to be selfish to ourselves and saying no when someone is trying to persuade you or guilt trip you into doing something. But when it comes to saying yes to the things that you actually want to do, when it comes to saying yes to the things that you actually give a fuck about, we are kind of timid or hesitant when it comes to saying yes, because we just too cool. We like, So the self-care piece, I don't want everyone to implement within their self-care regimen. Say yes to the things that make you happy. And if you do not know what makes you happy, if you do not know what excites you, if you're one of those individuals who are depressed and are like, I ain't fucking with shit, right? If you got anhedonia, there we go, that's the right clinical word, anhedonia going on, right? And that means, right, you're lacking in interest in things that you used to be interested in. So if I like to, I don't know, take pictures, and I'm not interested in taking pictures no more, that's a symptom of depression. That symptom is called anhedonia, but that's other stuff. Anyway, if that is you, and you are trying to figure out what you are interested in, just go do shit, right? Just go try. You got to get up and do a bunch of stuff and find out what you don't like. Because the more you find out what you don't like, that's going to lead you into the things that you actually do like. Right? So the self-care piece, I want everyone to implement within their self-care regimen. Say yes to the things that actually excite you. Don't be ashamed of that. If you are excited by little things, do that. If you're excited by weird shit, do that. As long as it's not harming anyone. If you are excited by anything out there, whatever it is, if you like to go to, I don't know, Long Beach got a lot of weird people. If you want to go to Long Beach and chill with the weirdos, whatever. Do what you got to do. As long as it makes you happy, as long as it puts you at ease, as long as it brings peace to your chaotic life that you already have, as long as it's not putting anyone else at harm's risk, do you, boo-boo. Do you, boo-boo. So, moving on forward, right, into the main topic. I got Jordan. What's the deal?
Hey, how's it going?
So, right, Jordan, right, what we're talking about here today on this show, like we're 30-40 minutes late already, but what we're talking about here today on this show, we're speaking about being culturally competent, right? And for all those individuals who do not know what culturally competent means, it means being competent of others' cultures, right? As a therapist, there are two things that are drastically important, right, within therapy. One of the things is the rapport, right? Making sure the rapport that you have with your patient or client, however you choose to call them, we use those words interchangeably, but making sure the rapport with that individual is as good as it possibly can be. On the other end, right, if I'm me as a black therapist, right, and I'm working with the patient, and my patient is a cisgender transsexual, I'm not even sure if I got that right.
You definitely did not.
If my patient is of the LGBTQ plus community, there we go. See, it's important that you remain competent, right? Culturally competent of that culture, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to offend that individual, right? You can get very, very offensive, right? I know for me, let's continue on with the LGBTQ community, right? If that individual would like to be identified as, let's say, their pronoun is they, right? If that individual, if one of their pronouns is they, and I don't use that pronoun correctly, it's going to make the conversation that much harder, right? Or if I'm working with someone who is, I don't know, Hispanic, right? If I'm working with someone who's Hispanic and I'm not up to date on their culture, historically, presently, whatever, it's going to make it harder for me to assist and help that patient out. It's going to make the treatment a little bit harder, because there are certain things that I'm not going to be able to do with that patient, and that patient isn't going to be able to work with me or understand where I'm going, because culturally it may not align up with their values and with their beliefs, right? An example of this, I was in supervision yesterday in a meeting for private therapy. An example of this would be and this is kind of wrong, but Mexico, in certain parts of Mexico, you have these small villages or these small communities called pueblos, right? And one of the things that happens within those communities is that the men, the adult males, what they do is, in order to bring their son into manhood, right, they molest them, right? They don't see it as that, but they molest them, right? That's a part of their culture. So when they bring that culture here in America, and then you get hit with all of this bad shit, that individual's like, yo, what's going on? But as a therapist, when you're working with those people, it's important to understand why it's hard for that person to see, you know, why it's so difficult on our end. Hopefully you understand the cultural competence definition by now, because that was a lot. Anyway, Jordan, what's the deal?
Yeah, so thank you for having me on your show. I think that it's important as a therapist to advocate about the cultural competency that we see and the disconnect that we might have with people from other cultures and other backgrounds. So I was just, you know, really into the topic, and I think it's important for me as a white therapist who has a voice and who has that communication opportunity to really advocate for that and stand up for different cultures who might be fearful of having those conversations. So that's why I'm here.
Good.
You know, just
how you
hang
doing
out.
though? Before we even get into all that shit, how are you doing?
I'm doing
What's
good.
going on with you?
What's going on with me?
Yeah, in your life.
Just working a lot right now and trying to find my niche in my therapy circle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working in private practice and running a teen support group, and that's going awesome.
How
And
is going well? Do you have a
yeah,
diverse population within that group?
I do actually, which is really exciting because I actually am in PV or Palos Verdes, and so historically I think that
Rich
that's
white people.
a rich white people community.
Yeah.
But it's nice because we're kind of open and integrating different cultures and different backgrounds into the group that I'm running right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 8 teenagers who come hang out with me every Thursday, and they're from all different types of backgrounds. So that's a lot of different personalities in one room.
So,
but it's great.
Yeah. So it's actually really, really dope that I have Jordan here because, as she mentioned, I don't know if she got caught onto it, but she's a white therapist, right? And when we speak about being culturally competent, it's for me. Just to be quite honest, for me in school, in undergrad, one of the things that when I first heard the word, it was for like, oh, so white people can understand us as patients, right? White people can understand the black folks, or white people can understand the minorities. Working within this field, you understand that it's much more broader than that, because as a black person, I have to be culturally competent of the things that, you know, I've just explained earlier, you know, in explaining the definition. So I brought Jordan here to speak with me about the challenges that she has as a white therapist when it comes to you know, opening up, allowing those patients to open up the doors for her to come in, right? Because when you have a black patient who's working with a white therapist, that black patient is hard. They have to open the door. So I brought Jordan here so she can be able to expound on some of the things that she says, some of the things that she does, some of the challenges, and some of the things that we can do with just as a community when it comes to working with people. Because a lot of black people, they want black therapists. Sometimes you may come across a black therapist who is just trash. And sometimes you may come across a white therapist who is just way better than that black therapist. No matter what it is, at the end of the day, it's all about how does that therapist relate to you, right? So thank you, Jordan, for actually coming in, first and foremost, and having this conversation with us.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this topic of cultural competence, right? Has there been any type of struggle within that realm for you?
For me personally, I would say that I would be lying if I didn't struggle with cultural competence, because that's such a fluid part of my role. So I could be aware, I can acknowledge that someone's culture is different. However, I think that if I said, oh, I'm culturally competent, I can work with anybody, I don't think that that's always true. I think that it's important for me personally to acknowledge someone else's culture, someone else's background for anyone who walks through the therapy room, and provide them with a space where they're comfortable to open up and build a relationship with me, build rapport. But it's my job as a therapist and as a white person to acknowledge that those are significant things in their life, and they're going to bring things from their life and from their background that is different than mine. And so I think I'm always adapting, always willing to learn, and I think I have to, if I want to say that I'm comfortable or competent, I have to immerse myself in literature, in the videos, and the things in society that are important to someone of a different culture.
But the one thing that I can say us as a black community doesn't like, and especially to me in graduate school, is that a lot of my white counterparts, a lot of my white coworkers, a lot of my white professors, a lot of my white friends, they lump a lot of black folks into this book because we have to read the literature in order to see. And then the literature doesn't paint a picture fairly well for black folks. So because I've seen that, they kind of tainted, and it does for a lot of other black folks. It taints, our view on white professionals, not even just white therapists, but white professionals in general, because you're going off of this script that doesn't really express who we truly are.
Right. I think that there's always these pre-assumptions of people with anyone that you interact with. And so you see a lot of the time, if you go in as someone who's like already making assumptions about someone or have that perception of them before they even open their mouth, then you're entering that conversation really guarded.
You lost already.
Yeah, and you can't even open up to that person or be willing to have a conversation with them if you're already going in afraid or going in guarded, going in with this idea that, oh, they're going to talk to me a certain way because they're from this background. And so my role, or everything that I do, it's not even just in the therapy room, it's every part of my life. I want to make sure that I'm open to the fact that I'm going to be conversating with someone who's different than me.
And it's just important as a therapist that you, like you just said, you check your bias at the door.
100%, you have to.
Right? Like, because we all have a bias towards a certain group, right? Based upon what we've been through in our lives. And if you come across a therapist who says that they don't hold some type of bias towards any type of group, they're flat out lying. Right? Because we all have our personal beliefs and values and things of that sort, right? Certain groups have affected us a certain way and things like that. However, just because you have that bias, it doesn't necessarily mean that bias has to affect your work. So if you allow it to affect your work, you're going to be doing a disservice to that individual that you're trying to help. But what I've noticed is there's a lot of therapists who aren't able to check their bias at the door. What would you recommend for those individuals who are struggling with checking their bias at the door when it comes to working with, a diverse group?
I think that's a great question. What can we do as people or as therapists really work on our cultural competency? And that is understanding what our biases are. They can be overt or they can be covert biases that we have. And so overt is like that, being that person that recognizes, oh, that's a black client that just came through my room, and like, how are you responding to that person, like with your body language and things like that. And so these are a little bit more obvious forms of biases, and then you have the overt ones, which are kind of internal, of like, you might be someone who's a little bit more nervous because someone came through the door who's of a different race than you. And so those things aren't very obvious to the other person necessarily, but the way that you interact with them. So my recommendation is just checking, what groups am I surrounded in? Like, am I part of a community that's all white? Am I part of a community that has, who has black people or Asian people or Hispanic people or Korean people, etc.? So looking around your community and seeing, am I comfortable? Do I turn away from someone who's of a different color, or do I embrace them?
Do you think that sometimes therapists unconsciously push away minority clients?
I think that they can.
How so?
They do so probably in the way of just their microaggressions towards that person. I think that if we're talking about being open to different cultures, we have to talk about microaggressions.
We have to, yeah.
Yeah. So, and microaggressions are kind of hard to see and hear, but they're there and they're very relevant.
Yeah, because like you said, they're hard to see and hear because microaggressions are very, they're subtle. Right? There are subtle things or statements or behaviors that are aimed at, or unconsciously, right? Because you may not be aware of them, but are aimed at demeaning that individual, that person, right? Dehumanizing that individual. Like, so for example, my girlfriend, she's biracial, right? A microaggression for that. And for me, I used to say this all the time growing up when I would come across biracial individuals, especially in high school. What are you? Right? That's a microaggression, right? Are you dehumanizing me? Is it just because I'm biracial that I'm not this or I'm that? Why is it what are you? As if I'm not a human being, right? So that within itself is a microaggression. So go ahead.
There's another example too of just subtle ways that you make comments towards people. Is like, say you have someone who is a native Spanish speaker and you don't know that they even speak Spanish, and you're like, wow, you speak so well for being Hispanic, you know, or
you speak so nice for being black.
Yeah, you speak so nice. You write so well, as if like we're assuming that that person or that culture doesn't have the ability to be educated.
You talk so white.
Or the assumption, even, you know, it goes past just race. It's like sexism is if you're like, you're getting attended to at the hospital by a male nurse and you're like, you're not the doctor.
True.
You know, you just assume that a male is going to be in a higher position, and then comes this, you know, female doctor, and you're like assuming that that's the nurse.
Yeah.
So microaggressions can be seen all throughout the ways that we interact with people. But again, it goes back to your question: what can we do to check those biases and see, am I actually acting on them? You know, you can have the thought, but are you acting on the thought? How are you responding to that person?
Yeah.
And that's really important.
And do you align yourself with that bias that you do have? Right?
Right.
Because we grow up with a certain perception of the way life is based upon the community that we're raised in, based upon how we were raised, between like our peers and our parents, and based upon our trauma. So, you know, that bias is sometimes formed unwillingly without our choice, right? But those biases that come, do you align yourself with those things? And are you open enough to challenge those things? Because what happens is, I've came across a lot of individuals who just aren't willing to challenge their bias. And the second that you try to challenge that, that person begins to push us away from you, right? I believe I spoke about this a few shows ago, in which we're so closed off to being open towards changing our own beliefs or towards changing our own values, that when we come across something new, we get scared, we get anxious, we back off. But when it comes to actually someone who's a therapist, it's your job to check it at the door. But we don't understand, and there's a lot of therapists who don't understand how to check that bias, right? Are you in therapy as a therapist?
Yeah, I do. I go to therapy.
Have you came across any of that stuff with your therapist, or have you ever like wondered like, I wonder what that meant with your therapist?
I think so. My therapist is, I actually don't know what race she is, but I know that she is darker toned.
Do you think that's important?
I think it's important, you know, because I've been on the other end of that as a therapist, and I have someone, you know, come in and they're Pakistani. You know, that's important for me to know that, because if I deny the significance of their culture, their background, and their experiences, then I'm not doing them any service.
But is it for you as the white patient, is that important for you? Not you as a white therapist, but you as a white patient, is that important for you, for that race?
As a human being, as someone who would go to therapy, and I've done the process of looking for one, I do know, I consciously was like, if I have a therapist that's of a different color, are they going to understand me? You know? And then I thought, well, why am I asking that question? Because in my role, I advocate for, you know, mixed races to receive work from mixed races. So I was like, you know what? I think I should just put that behind me. I shouldn't assume that this person can't understand me. I need to go in and have that conversation with them. And I aligned myself with the therapist more on their background, more on their topics that they focus on, like women empowerment was really important to me when I was finding someone for myself. And so that's what I focused on.
Yeah.
And then it just so happened that I found a therapist that was of a different race. But I never explicitly asked her, although maybe if I was of a different color, she would have asked me if that mattered to her as my therapist, because it does matter to me. You know, whenever I'm on the other side as the therapist role and someone comes in and they're of a different color, I don't want to say I don't see color, because I think people who say that are, one, a little ignorant, And two, like, that's just, that kind of downplays that significance again.
I mean, those individuals who say I don't see color, and those individuals who and there are some therapists who work with this colorblind approach, right? That within itself, one, is racist.
And a microaggression.
A microaggression, obviously. And then it also touches on, you know, the privilege that white people have.
Yeah.
Right? White people have the privilege to be able to maneuver through the world without being mindful of their skin complexion and how is that going to affect, you know, their outlook amongst different groups. Black people, Hispanics, biracial people, Asians, we have to be mindful of where we're at because of how we are. You know, so even that within itself, right? This whole colorblind approach, or white people saying, hey, you know, I don't see color, I just look at you as a person. You know, we want to be careful that we don't demean that individual.
I think in a way, though, the reason why people who are white say, I don't see color, is in their mind, it might be some inclusion type thing. They're trying to say, look at me, I'm not racist. You know, look at me, I at least don't care what you are. But they might not know that that's offensive, you know? And so it comes down to that awareness of, it does matter to me. I care where you come from. I care that we're different. But I would also ask the same questions of a white client too. What was it like growing up for you? And how different was that? Or I've had an adult client who did not want to see me because I looked young. And so I had to break down that ageism as well. Like, why does this matter to you?
Yeah.
And so just create the role as a therapist and as a white therapist. It's my job. It's my responsibility to make you comfortable.
Exactly. Right. Because especially that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it opens the door for us to say that culture is deeper than just race.
Right.
Right. Culture is deeper than just race. And I say that because me as a black person who grew up in South Central, we're not going to have the same, culturally, we're not going to have the same ideologies as another black person who grew up in Beverly Hills, right? We may align ourselves because of our race, but culturally and how we grew up and the things that we went through and the struggles and the things that we grew up in, it's not going to be the same way. So when it comes to someone who's finding another, you know, therapist, for me, you know, does my therapist have to be white? I'm going to say I have to have another therapist of color.
Right.
The reason why I have to have another therapist of color, and this is important for, you know, those other individuals who are looking for, you know, therapists. What is your own bias towards that other race, right? For me, when it comes to white people, one of the things that I always catch myself thinking about is, okay, what do you mean by this, right? I'm always looking for those microaggressions that you're speaking of, right? That we're speaking of, because I'm on defense mode. And if you're in therapy in defense mode, it's okay to say that therapist, or you don't align well with that therapist. That therapist may be great. That therapist may have the license, all the certifications, and all the specialties and everything they have all the tools to help you out, but because you as a patient, you as a client, your own personal biases does not allow you to open up to that therapist, change therapist. That's not wrong. That's not wrong at all, but it just forces you to be in a position in which you have to be honest with yourself.
I think that's a good point, and that honesty can come from the other end too, is that whenever I get a client and I do an intake, I ask for the race or ethnicity, and I realize that person is going to be of a different race than me, I get nervous because I'm afraid that they are going to be so defensive with me if I work with them. So I get nervous as someone is like, I want to do the right thing by this person. Is it going to be healthy for me? Can we build this rapport? Can we interact? I feel comfortable with that, but you just said that your own biases kind of play in as a client. And so I consider that too. I try to think ahead of, okay, I just got a black client today. And so is that person going to want me as their therapist because I'm white? So I'm very cognizant of that. And I want to open that up and have that conversation with them. So I always talk about barriers and boundaries with the person the first time I meet them.
What was one of your most challenging clients when it comes to this topic?
I think the most challenging was when I had an adult that was older. She was in her late 50s, and she didn't want to see me at all because I was young. And that really hit something with me. I had a lot of countertransference with her because she refused to talk to me. And I was like, what is it? Like, I'm experienced, I'm educated, I know how to talk about these things.
That
like,
don't mean
let
shit.
me prove to you, right? But it hurt my feelings, and that was probably the most challenging in terms of any ism that I had, because I'm open to talking to anybody, because I think that person just needs the opportunity to be heard, understood, and validated, and have a comfortable, safe space. If I'm the only white person that this person is going to interact with, I want them to know that they're protected and that they're safe with me. Mm-hmm. And that's my job. And I want them to know that if we're out and about and someone sees this black person with a white person, it's my job to advocate for that person, to stick up because they don't have a voice. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of a client of a different race, a challenging thing that I had was I would do home visits with this young black couple, and we were in a community where it was weird for them to be walking around with a white therapist. Or when I showed up, it was like all the blinds were opening and like, hey, this person doesn't belong here.
Police, you come and snatch my kid.
Exactly. So there's this like hard assumption. And so I was so afraid that we weren't going to get anywhere because of their defenses and their background. And I wanted to honor that. And so it was important for me to bring that up, and like, hey, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm white. Is this a problem?
And that's the most important part, right?
Yeah.
Is that just being completely honest from the gate, right? Yeah. And just and putting all of the differences and all of the biases and everything on the table, even within like the first session, right? Not the first few, the first one, right? And the reason why I believe that's important is because it softens the blow a little bit, because when we're both dealing with individuals who are of a different race or of a different class, or the age range is drastically different, right? There's this what's the tension? There we go. Mm-hmm. There's this tension within a room. There's this elephant in a room that we both are kind of thinking of. How does that person feel that I'm black? How does that person feel that I'm white? How does that person feel that, I'm younger? Is my older patient, like you're talking about, probably one of the reasons why she didn't want you as a therapist, because she was going to look at you as a daughter, as a child, or as an individual who don't know anything. It's not anything that goes against you, but it's something that has to be laid out on the table. So one of the things I commend you for is within that, and then anybody else who struggles with this, is just put everything else on the table, right?
And it's so important to just be honest. If I have someone that I'm uncomfortable with, even as a therapist, if something makes me uncomfortable, then it's my like role is to make sure that they still feel safe and that I work on it on the back end. Mm-hmm. So in that, like, if this person says something that makes me uncomfortable, makes me hesitant to continue to work with them. Like, I've worked with people who were incarcerated. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of a whole population of itself, is these people who were just in jail. I did their assessment while they were in jail, and now I have to work with integrating them into the community. Mm-hmm. And people of various different races, and just the way that they grew up, the way that the things that they saw were different than mine. If I was afraid, I needed to work on that with my supervisor. I needed to work with that on collaborating with other clinicians who maybe have more experience than I do. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a human too when I'm in the room. Yeah. And I can't really bring that to the table. It's unfair to that person. It's unsafe if I'm kind of using that as a way to not make this relationship work.
And like, to me, that's also another big thing, is helping therapists understand, even within themselves, that they're humans and they have emotions as well. Mm-hmm. Like, there are things within, that session that affect the both of us. And it's important to check not only your bias at the door, but check that counter-transference once you leave the door. Once you leave the session, make sure it doesn't affect the upcoming sessions. But at the same token, you really, like, and I'm looking at this from a client perspective, and yeah, I'm looking at this from a client perspective, and one of the things that I struggle with when it comes to working with other individuals is how can I, as a client or the patient, allow myself to be open enough for that therapist?
Right.
Because I can just say that it would be extremely hard for me to be open towards another white therapist, only because I would be in defense mode within a session. I would begin to think, like, if I speak about my trauma, you're going to it's a possibility that you may relate this back to slavery or to racism or to historically how we've been treated, and I'm always going to be like, why? What do you think that clients or patients should do in order to allow them or assist them with being open with that other individual who is of another race or class or age or whatever?
I think that as from a client perspective, it's just voicing that hesitancy to the person you're working with, and kind of sitting, if you're uncomfortable, there's a reason, and knowing why you're uncomfortable is your job to look into that. So as a client who's meeting with someone who's like, I can't open up, I can't be vulnerable, and there's a reason why I can't. These are the fears that I have. If you're in a space where this therapist is receiving you well and you're safe, and they're an ethical clinician, that is the space for you to say, I'm uncomfortable today, and this is why. I'm afraid that what I just shared with you, you might take and kind of spin it. Or they're always, people I feel from different races are operating on fear. And that fear kind of has to be dispelled. That fear has to be worked on. And that's just through opening up and allowing those uncomfortable feelings to drive you and to make you work a little deeper on why those fears are there. And it's hard because for me, I can sit here, and I'm just one individual. I can sit here and say, come see me, and like you'll see that like we can have this conversation, we can be comfortable, you don't have to be afraid. But there are bad apples out there, and there are people who are going to push you away. And recognizing what your limits are is really important as well. Knowing your boundaries as well. Knowing that I just think that with a person of color who wants to see a white therapist, like, not to allow that to push away, but kind of welcome the uncomfortability to have that conversation, because you're going to continue to be uncomfortable. You're going to continue to feel unsafe unless you really want to work on it and talk about it. Because, my client who, in like the black couple that I was seeing in their home, they had a little kid, and like I was working with them, and it was like, now this is a really good experience that they got to have with a white person. So they don't always have to be afraid. And that was really important to me, and I did a lot of work with them as a family, and it was like, I recognized that there were huge differences between how they grew up and how I grew up. But that's for everyone. But at the same time, it's like, I can show them that there can be positive interactions with people of a different color. And if that's what I got out of working with them, that was really important to me. And I hope that was beneficial to them too. But I talked about it with them. I said, I'm this white person telling you too, as this young black couple, how to operate. Not even really telling them. I was more listening and guiding them.
But even that within itself is still...
it's
still something there, because
scary.
Yeah, it's scary, because no matter how open you try to be, there's always going to be that small bit of aggression or defense.
I felt like at times they didn't trust what I had to say.
Exactly.
And even though I was reflecting back what they said, and if you have a really good therapist, someone that's willing to work with you, trusting them is so important, and that starts from the minute they make the phone call to see you.
Exactly. And
I think that for anyone who is listening, it's important to know that like that first interaction makes a huge difference. So if you're guarded, if you're hesitant to work with them because of a different color, like, that's not going to do any good for the work that you can do. It's not going to do any good for the work that you can do, but also that right there should be the flag or the red flag to tell you that you need to go ahead and possibly get therapy on your own bias if it's hard for you to get out of it. As a therapist, because we speak about this a lot
in school, in our profession, we come across this word, we feel it, right? And we all, I don't, it's hard for me to believe that, you know, when you come across an individual who does not look like you don't feel something. I believe we all feel something, right? I feel something when I'm working with black women. Am I going to be able to understand her as a woman? I'm going to understand her as a black person, but am I going to understand her as a woman? Am I going to understand someone as a gay male or female? Am I going to understand this person as a white person? Am I going to allow myself as a black therapist to not try to demean this white person, this white patient, just because they're white? Am I going to not allow my bias to get to the situation? And what that means is that I have to check myself. And it is hard for people to check themselves, right? I know for me, I'm even still working at that, right? But the one true way I believe we all can fully check ourselves is by being educated, with anything, right? Especially when it comes to, let's say, the one thing I drastically need to be educated on is the LGBTQ community, right? And that's something I'm actively working on now, right? Within my private practice or within a certain not classes, but certain trainings that I'm taking on the side. But just be educated within that area in which you're struggling with. And if you're not willing to be educated in that area, do what you have to do to make sure you don't work with that population. It's okay to say, like, hey, you know, let me refer you to XYZ, or let me refer you, or I have a friend, or blah, 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 blah. You don't have to accept every patient, every client that comes your way. Same with the patients. You do not have to accept every therapist. And I think that's something that happens a lot. We preach therapy, and then when I go to therapy, I come across a therapist who don't look like me, who is trash, who is ugly, who is like all of these things. I don't think being ugly has anything to do with it.
Ugly inside.
Exactly, right? We have all of these things, then I cut off therapy altogether. And it's like, nah, just like you said, we have a few bad apples in the tree, right? There are a few bad therapists. There's also a few therapists, a few good therapists. You have to get out and actually work and try and put in that effort to find what works for you.
And I think as the therapist too, about kind of developing your competency, your cultural competency, is the immersion, is the involvement with the community that you're seeking to understand.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's looking at your circle, the people that you work with, who are you spending time with? If as a white person, if I'm saying, you know what, I'm an ally to these communities, but I don't interact with anyone of a different color. All my friends are white. All my, coworkers are white. Like, if I don't take a job because my supervisor might be black, like all of these things, if I'm saying that I'm an ally, then I have to represent that all throughout my life. Yeah. And that's so important. And so it's the immersion into the culture, into the differences, and kind of opening yourself up and wanting to learn. Because there's no way that as a person, even if I was a person of color, my background is going to be so different than the next person's. But I have to show that willingness and that eagerness to be involved. Exactly. And if I don't show that, then at the end of the day, you're not going to feel comfortable as someone coming to see me and be like,
you're going to see it.
They can, read the bullshit.
Exactly.
Like, they're going to see it right through you.
Exactly.
If I'm saying, I don't see color, or I don't care that you're of a different race, like, that's so ignorant.
All that shit.
Like, that doesn't help anybody, and you're lying to yourself. And so really, you should check yourself and really want to, do the work, because there's something missing there. That's not right. Definitely.
So, moving on to the next part of the show, right? Moving on to the question, right? The question that I never write down. It's just a question that I kind of pull out my ass based upon whatever vibe or whatever feeling I'm getting for the show, right? And the question that I pose to you, Jordan, and I'm also going to pose to myself, as a therapist, what could you do in order? What could you do on the back end? What could you do in order to make sure your bias does not affect yourself within the session, and you can kind of get rid of that bias outside of the session? So just for me to answer that question, the one thing that I know I have to do for a fact is because I have a good amount of bias towards white people.
A good amount.
I have a good amount of bias towards white people. And the one thing that I have to do when it comes to checking that, right, is just be open and not be in defense mode all the time, right? Because a lot of my friends make it. They crack jokes because they say I'm racist and all of these things, but I'm just always in defense mode when I comes around white people. And does that say something about the white person? No. Does that say something about me? Yes. It's important that I challenge those negative thoughts. I challenge those beliefs and those values that I put on myself, and ask myself, okay, just because you have these beliefs, does that necessarily mean you have to align yourself with those beliefs? Let me make sure that even though you have these beliefs or you have these biases, don't align yourself with it. So one of the things that I have to do is just open myself and put myself around white people a little bit more.
You took my answer. Literally, I think just like as myself, checking those biases and understanding that I am a person and I come with these like initial thoughts and values and beliefs that are going to be different, is just being involved, being around people that are different from me. And, you know, I make judgment based on like a feeling, like an intuition. Can I trust this person? And like, I think that intuition is also really important, because I don't want to come on here and say, white people are great, like we're your friends, you know, because that's not true.
You're gonna make me get black power.
Yeah, no, I don't think that it's true. But you can, you know, trust your intuition whenever you're interacting with people, and don't force yourself to have interactions with people that you feel completely uncomfortable with.
Say that again.
You need to find someone that you feel safe to talk through these challenges with. And the hope is that you can have that conversation with a culturally competent therapist. But if you can't find someone, or if you're doing therapist shopping and really no one's clicking with you, then reach out to like your closest support and be like, hey, this has happened to me, you know, and just talking about it. But it's going to continue to be uncomfortable unless you're willing to be open. So that's how I check my biases. Like, am I willing to be open? Can I expand my friend group? Can I expand the people that I talk to? And what does that look like? Because I'm not going to lie, and before really working where I work, I was never really around people of the black community. I grew up in a small town where that really wasn't what was happening around me. And so coming here to the LA County, there's a huge diverse population. And I had to check, okay, I have a small town bias and I need to work on that. Like, I come from a small Okie town. I need to really check myself, because that's not going to be healthy.
Small Okie.
It's true. It's true. But that's important. Check where you're from and make sure, like.
You sounded real white just now.
Well, I'm not done with y'all yet. All right? No, I'm just kidding. No, but really, it's just that willingness to be open and having that conversation.
Yeah.
If I never struck the conversation with you initially, then like I wouldn't have had the opportunity to talk about it, because people are so afraid to talk about race, and I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, why is this white girl not afraid to talk about race? What does that have to say about her?
And I appreciate you, and I appreciate you for that, right? Because a lot of the conversations that we've had outside of here is I don't want to say I bash white people in front of you, but like
But I bash white people in front of you.
I appreciate the fact that you allow me to be open towards my own personal bias in front of you, because that opens the door for me and letting me know that, like, hey, all white people ain't retarded. You know, all white people don't hold this certain, you know, hatred towards black folks. You know, some white people are cool.
But trust your intuition, because if I was someone who was like, if I was someone that just wasn't willing to that, you could say something and I could completely take that out of context and use it to your harm. You know, like I don't want to say that all white people are safe, because white people aren't safe.
Oh, you right.
Don't trust white people. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
but I think
you ain't just kidding. We're gonna end it with that. Thank you, everyone, for coming into the show.
I just think, just be careful, you know, and just trust your intuition. You know you better than I know you. And I might want to get to know you, but at the end of the day, you have to be willing as well. And I have to be willing.
Exactly.
And it's again, like, I just feel like the white people created the problem. And so white people have that responsibility to other cultures to honor them and to make sure that their space is protected and safe, and that they have the opportunities that they need, because, you know, privilege.
fix the shit y'all created, white people.
Yeah, no, seriously, and it's frustrating. I think
It's very frustrating, but at the same token, just us as black people, and this is probably going outside of the lens of therapy, and I'm gonna try to keep this short. But us as black people, we kind of have to get out of the aspect of white people need to fix the problem, and black people just need to be the solution towards the problem that they're looking for white people to fix. And
Right.
what I mean by that is, if we're saying white people are doing this, white people are doing that, us as black people, we just need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do so we don't have these white people looking at us sideways, right? Or we need to make sure we stick with our group, or we need to make sure that we don't blame white supremacy on everything. We don't blame white supremacy on the fact that I can't move up in my job, or that I'm stuck in a project and things like that. Like, nah, the system is created, and the system to put everyone down is there, and the system is in the school system, it's in the governmental system, it's in the judicial system, it's in all these systems are there and created in order to keep black people in one specific spot. But does that mean that you can't get out of what you need to get out of? No, you can get out of what you need to get out of, and that's a side that was hard for me to kind of, accept growing up, is that, damn, I have all these white people looking at me sideways, right? But I don't care. Sometimes I do shit just because I see, a white person did it, okay, bet, I can do that shit 10 times way better, But that bias that I have within myself, I have to be able to check that, not only as a therapist, but also as a client, as a patient when I'm seeking therapy. Because if I allow those things to get in the way of who I'm trying to be as a person, it's going to do nothing but disrupt and cause me to not grow as much as I can. So, Jordan,
Yeah.
good looking for coming through, yo.
Yeah, of course.
Good looking.
I think it's so important to just have conversations like this and just be candid about it, because there are going to be people who are going to align themselves or ally with the different communities. And whether that's a race community or the LGBTQ community, there are people who are going to be supportive, and you just have to find your people in order to have that voice. And it takes time.
It takes time.
I just love that whenever you said white supremacy, like the sound in the back was this like thunder rolling and like scary tune. But I feel like that was appropriate.
Hey, they know what's up. But furthermore, what's most important, man, thank you to all those individuals who are listening and tuning in. Thank you to Jordan for coming through and allowing me to have this conversation with you. Thank you to all those individuals who won't be listening, tuning in tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, whenever you listen to this. And also, I didn't say this in the beginning, but I'm saying this now. Thank you to all those individuals who will be tuning in. Didier, your light just cut off. I don't know why. But anyway, thanks to all those individuals who think they too good for mental health or therapy or whatever the case may be. You probably haven't caught on to it yet, but you will catch on to it eventually. And as always, understand this, man. Ain't no wealth without your mental health. There is no wealth without your mental health, man. So please stay blessed and take care of yourself. Be great, y'all. Peace.